Okay, for people who are joining this live stream, this is yet another episode in our effort to get our database integration functionality ready for release with version 12 of Wolfram Language. And there were a number of contentious issues that we had run into, and we need to continue grinding on them. So I think that one of the main issues was the handling of entity versus entity class, and the formatting of what happens there. So where had we got in the previous discussion?
So I think we got to the point where we decided that that all of the new entity class-like heads should not format. That single entity should format, but they should have something that indicates when they are more complex than having just a simple string as the first argument. And
right, well, so we didn't seem to take notes here, but I mean the main thing that I think we need to notate here. Oops, what just happened here? I just ended up with something wrong here. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. It seems like Roger just joined this.
Yes.
Okay, so Wolfram Desktop latest version is crashing on Lambda.
Okay.
I'm using the Mathematica instead, but please check the laptop so you can come and get the other one.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so I think what we had talked about last time was things where there is a okay, so this is about formatting, and it's about formatting of entities. So the conclusion of its entity, if there is a common name, use that in the formatting. Does that make sense to people? That was what we concluded last time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Annotate with icons. To indicate other stuff. These other operations. Okay. Now with entity class, okay. So what on this input, right? I'm a little disappointed we don't have a summary that somebody else made. Do I need to make the summary, or are you guys on top of this? Do you know what to do? Tony, can you speak to that, please?
Which summary?
Well, of what we're supposed to be doing here, right? So this case.
Yes. So if it's a named entity class, then format it. Otherwise, it's code and don't format.
Yes, that's basically right. And but in this case, right, we need to make sure that for the input form, for the input here, that we preserve. I'm sorry?
This is an implicit entity, so it goes in the category upstairs. So it still formats.
That's fine, but what I'm saying is it's important to get the original linguistics in it. You get what I'm saying? Do you understand?
Until the first evaluation.
What's that? Until
the first evaluation.
That is correct. And I believe that this output should probably be open by default. Okay? Did you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Do we disagree? Do we have any disagreement on that?
No, because these are single entities.
I understand, but I'm trying to make sure we have a conclusion here that we can go from.
It might a little bit depend on the circumstances. Obviously, if you come from a control equal, having it open is definitely much nicer. If you have a list of 20,000 of them and you evaluate them or read them in from a
fair enough. I mean, I wonder whether in that case, I don't know. I mean, if there's 20,000 of them, the thing will elide with short anyway. I think it's not useful to have them not open because I think you just can't see what the heck is going on without having them open.
I mean, the alternative would be some interface element that opens and closes all of them on the screen rather than one by one.
Yes, that's an interesting idea. That is an interesting idea. I mean, that's a general idea about elision of stuff in the Carl on our live stream asks the interesting question of whether there's any hope for multilingual entity names. And the answer is yes, because we have translations of Wolfram Alpha but that's actually something we haven't thought about. I mean, we presumably have that. We presumably have the information for like Japanese for some of these things, right?
For some of
Chinese.
the things, yes. But
That's
not exhaustive.
I mean, is it worth us considering having a a dollar entity language that switches that? I don't know. Interesting question. We should add that to the list. It's a good idea.
Can I make a general comment?
Yes.
I really don't like the fact that the orange boxes of both entity and entity class look exactly the same. Like, I'm talking about the border.
Okay. I don't disagree with you.
I think it's a source of confusion.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have Billy on the phone?
Yes.
I agree with that statement. Okay, I think we should do something different for entity classes. What could we do? What is the sign of class? And I don't mean higher or lower social class. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm making a joke. What is the sign that something is a class? We've tended to have those multiple dots, right? I wonder if putting dots around the border would be an interesting way to indicate that it's a class somehow. Comments from anybody?
Just another color would be probably more.
I think it's incomprehensible. You need something that has some semantic content, otherwise it's hopeless. People can't remember colors.
Yeah, but they will at least distinguish that something is entity and something is entity class.
No, they won't. They won't. They'll just be confused. They need something which has some semantic connection with some way that we're indicating classes for some other reason, like the multiple dots, for instance. Billy, do you want to comment on this?
No, one distinction would be what we discussed the last time that Tony just fixed this morning, the differentiation between singular and plural in the entity type.
That's something. I don't think it's enough. Billy, can you respond, please? Can you try a version of this which has this kind of like dashed or dotted or something around the edge?
Yeah.
But I think it's a good idea to distinguish them. Okay, so for entity class, under what's okay? So there's case one is named entity class get yellow boxed, right?
Yes.
Okay. What other entity classes get yellow boxed?
My vote is for no other. But
Okay,
you are very much against that. I don't like the implicit ones. I mean, I think I can live with the all entity class country all being yellow boxed.
Okay, but so okay, hold on, guys. We're trying to make a list, right? The statement, we don't want any of them, and then we say, well, but some of them we do. We need to, clarify. Okay. Hey, background noise. Okay, so this case here, right? You're suggesting that becomes a yellow box, yes?
Well, it's entity class, and all could just be considered as a special name, so it can be thought of as falling in the category of named class.
All right, fine. Okay, so those two would get yellow boxed, and otherwise it wouldn't yellow box.
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm okay with that. Now let's talk about we had gotten into the morass of aggregation functions. I know we have to talk about that. Okay, what's this label business? What's that, and how does that relate to any of this? I feel like this meeting is not well prepared. Can somebody please tell me what it is we're supposed to be talking about here?
Okay, so there is labels are the same thing as common name, and when common name is not available, we fall back to canonical name.
Right. Okay. So the hierarchy is labeling is common name followed by, what is it called? Is it called entity label? What's it called in an entity store? Tony?
The property is called label.
Okay. Okay, so it's an
But
entity store. Yes?
Common name just retrieves the label.
In an
What
entity
kind of-
store.
Yes.
Right, I understand, but in the knowledge base, common name is something different. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, in some cases.
Okay, so let's talk about something else. Does common name for an entity from an external database, presumably common name would also retrieve the function common name would retrieve the label, correct?
Yes, if present, yes.
If present.
Is that documented?
No, but
okay, so make sure it is documented.
Okay, but in most cases it will not be present.
Well, unless you put it in there. Right, unless you put it in. Now,
yes, but you're this way we would be introducing like some kind of reserved name for that, meaning that if the database originally has something called label, that means I don't know something called.
No, we're not doing that. That's a completely different level in the entity store.
No, it's not. It lives at the same level as the properties. What I'm saying is that if you have something like
that's a mistake.
Music records, or
that's a mistake.
Like
that's a mistake. It doesn't live. Tony, that's wrong, right? It does not live at the same level as the properties, does it?
It is a property, a special property.
That's a mistake. Then we should have a separate thing called something like, in entity store, we should have a separate thing called metadata or something. Just like we have properties, we should have something called metadata, which means it's a thing that isn't, confused with the properties.
Well, one way around
it's not a property.
Because we don't want to have a reserved name.
Well, one way around this would be only label when it's a symbol, not a string, would act like that, and that way there could be no collision with.
No, that's not going to work. There's no symbol label. That means something completely different. Okay, so is it the case that these things, possible entries in the data association for a given type? Oh, label for the type. Okay. Possible entries for each entity class. Okay, so is it the case that in the database mapping that these are combined with the actual names of columns in the database? True or not true?
Not actually combined. So the current status is that the entity framework tries to retrieve the label for labeling all kind of objects if it's available, except for databases where this has been disabled.
Okay, that's a hack. Okay, so let's go through this again. Okay, the thing comes back from the database. It has a column name here and it has a value, right? For each row corresponding to an entity, it has something like this, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, so if we wanted to have a label for formatting, right? The place that in our existing framework, in our in-memory framework, what we would do is have a property here called label that says, right, something like that, correct? Tony,
Yes.
is that correct? Okay, so that of course is a hack relative to, because it means you're mixing that name with the name of the columns, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what we need to do is obviously separate it out, right? And I don't know exactly how to do it. Possibly, I don't know, if we've got some option name, some symbol option name that we can use in this association, we could use that symbol option name and have a sub-association that gives the metadata.
Well, it actually, since this association, I think has, no, because this is an association of properties.
There is another problem as well. What if we decide that this label is a function computed on the row? How are you going to express that?
Okay. Well, maybe what we need to do is
I mean, in general, it should be a function because you can use multiple columns to combine the name.
And in fact, we have a way to do that because we are able to register properties which are essentially computed properties. So the only real problem here is that we don't want it to be string. So we can maybe Carlos suggested a symbol or some symbolic wrapper. Why not?
Sorry, for what?
For the label. Have it be a special computed property which has a non-string name. This way it will never collide with the names we're getting from the database columns.
Sorry. I'm sorry, you're saying this should have a non-string name. That's exactly what I was just saying.
Okay.
Right, so what I'm saying is something different. I'm saying we want a sub-association so we can put multiple things in there, right?
But why do we need?
It doesn't need to be a sub-association. It could just be entity label goes to blah, and that label can be a symbol.
In a way, we can argue that sub-association will be wrong.
What?
Sub-association would be wrong, we can argue, because essentially a label is also a property, maybe a computed property.
No, I'm suggesting a different thing. Okay, so look, one possibility is we just got to make up symbol names for everything that we want to have in here, right? So for example, you know, the most natural thing, I wonder. See, yeah, I mean, because what we really want is a labeling function, which we already have. What uses a labeling function? Yeah, right.
Either this or another option, if you plan for several such things, would be to have a single symbol and then the thing you want will be a string inside.
Of course. Oh, well, I wasn't thinking inside, but we could do that. We could say, you know, we could have a thing called, you know, I don't know, really like this, but something like entity metadata of label, arrow, whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think both of those are reasonable things to go for. The labeling function, that would be an option to, that would be a higher level option in Entity Store, basically. Tony, does that make sense to you?
Why does it have to be a function as opposed to an explicit list?
Well, because you might want a function. You might not want a list.
Yes, but still a function on which level? What we were discussing was that the label can be on the level of every row. And if you are defining it as
I know, but what I'm saying is the labeling function would take, okay, this function f would take row names, row strings, and it would turn them into the label that you will show for that row string. Right? So if you look at the Entity Store, this will be at the same level, presumably, as something which says, well, I don't know why it needs to even be, if it's at that level, it can be done differently, right? So it says, just like you say, label to use in displaying this type. Okay, so we could have, right, so at this level here, we'd be saying how to, you know, we could have an entity labels, or we could have an entity labeling function at that level. Am I making sense? At this level here.
But we would need to repeat that for property labels, class labels, property class labels.
Yes, that's correct. Well, so then
you can view it in different ways. Depending on how you view it, it will be the level on which you define it.
Well, okay, but so hold on. So this could say entities arrow some function, you know, property classes arrow some function, etc. Does that make sense to people? So that would go at this level. Labeling functions would go at this level. Now, you could go to a lower level, but I think this will be the most common case. Is you won't want to define, if you want to. Okay,
there is a problem with this, and it's that of all the one for entities needs to be an entity function. The other can be pure functions.
Why? It's going to be done on the client side.
No,
it's going to be done on the client side.
No, that's.
Well, then, if it is an entity function, it can be done on the server side. If it isn't an entity function, it's done on the client side.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever. At least for now, for databases, we are disabling this mechanism anyway, because it doesn't really make sense to make two different queries, one just for formatting, and the database might get out of sync in the meantime. So,
well, that's a different issue. You need to figure that out.
No, we've already figured it out. So basically, right now, for entity stores that are backed by entities, there is like one global special property, basically, per type, that is set to false, and that tells you that you should never try to do side effects when formatting.
I understand, but here, look. So can be either an entity function or a generic function. And it will do different things, because the most common case is probably going to be take the string and make some string fluffing on it. Change the underscores to
probably the most common thing is for it to be an entity property, which just means use this property as a label.
That's correct.
That's why I was saying an entity function, because entity function behaves.
Well, okay, so hold on. I think the very most common thing would be it would say entities arrow inside there. Instead of F, it would be entities arrow column name. See what I'm saying?
No, that's not that. You see, this is why this is confusing, because there is a label for the entity type and a label for the single.
No, I'm talking about the single entity. Look at what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
I'm saying this is labeling functions for the top level, and it says that the entity's labeling function is F. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you cannot use a string. The string means a constant function.
I think that's not right.
That's what I find confusing here.
No, I understand that, but that's a very common idiom that we use these days. You don't want to have to say that. That's stupid to have to say, entity function of X, comma.
No, that's why I was suggesting
column name.
No, yeah, that's why I was suggesting you can use entity property there.
Either way, it's still why not just use this?
Okay, fine. Where you can use an entity property, you can use a string. That's fine.
Fine. Okay.
So you're basically proposing a level of indirection that by default points to the label property, but can be changed to point to another property.
That's not necessarily property. It can be any function. That's why I wrote F.
Yes.
Okay, listen, guys. I need to understand what we're trying to achieve in this meeting. I'm going to run out of time in 15 minutes. This is kind of the last meeting that we need to have in this series. So what are we trying to achieve in this particular meeting?
Okay, then if we only have 15 minutes, then maybe we should talk about this relational database thing.
No, I would not take him to any of the weddings. I have to go.
Okay. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, can we get an answer to that? What are we trying to achieve in this meeting? We did not have a clear agenda for this meeting. What are we trying to achieve here?
Well, we have several topics. We have also a mock that Billy made.
I'm sorry?
To review.
I'm sorry? Andrea, are you talking to me?
Yes.
What are you saying?
Well, we have the relational database that we didn't finish last meeting, and we have also a design review that Billy make a mock-up for today.
Okay, all right, fine. Let's look at the Billy stuff first. Okay, and I want to be clear, Andrea, that's I mean, I don't want to find out that, oops, we didn't get to this in this meeting. So we have specific things to do. We have this labeling stuff we just talked about. Okay, mostly that is not going to make it for this version, but that's the plan for the future, right? That's thing number one. Thing number two, we're going to go over this. Thing number three, we're going to talk about this relational database wrapper. Thing number four, if we have time, we'll talk about aggregation function. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, next time, please make sure we actually have an agenda. Don't just feed me back my notes from last time. Okay. All right, let's look at Billy's mock-up here. That's quite nice. So is this consistent with our previous use of that weird peeling banana icon?
Yes, because in the end, implicit entities can always be represented as single entities of an aggregated entity class.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question again. What are we planning to use this peeling banana icon for? We're using it right now to represent what?
Implicit entities.
All
like the
implicit
food
entities.
ones, like the food ones.
Okay, so it's all implicit entities.
Yeah, and not implicit entity classes, only entities.
Okay, but so this is an entity class, and I
No,
don't
that's
understand.
an entity. Those are all entities. None of these are entity
Okay,
classes.
so why are we calling? So are you suggesting we discontinue using this for the generic entity class?
No, that was never used for generic entity class. That was used for implicit entity.
I understand that. I'm asking the question, is it the case that the current implicit entities all correspond to aggregated entity classes?
I think, yes, that they can all be represented as such.
Do we know? Is there a translation from that arrow notation to an aggregated entity class?
Not as yet,
okay.
but I could
Tony,
write
it. Okay, but if it is
yes,
true that they're equivalent, then we should use that icon. Yeah.
There is a mechanism to, not documented, but it is possible to convert every implicit entity to an aggregated entity, class-based entity.
Why don't you put a function into the function repository that does that?
Yeah, or properties and relations in the documentation.
No, not properties and relations in the documentation. A function in the function repository.
Okay.
I said that because I meant it, right? You can put it in properties and relations as well, but we want it as a function in the function repository. I mean, what we're trying to do is to get rid of this thing where there's some giant piece of code that gets put in the documentation, and that's the only place to find it. Okay, this one here, I don't really know why.
That means you get two types. One is red, one is blue, and then becomes a mongrel purple type.
I think the red looks a little bit, I don't know. I'm not even sure you need two colors there. I think this arrow notation with dots could be enough.
Well, it's the only one that takes actually two classes and make it.
All right, fine. Does the red scare you, so to speak? No.
Me? Why would the red scare me?
I don't know, because it looks like an error. Just make sure it's more purple than red. Billy, are you with us?
Yep, got it.
I think that the idea we were going for is like primary colors, and people have a clear understanding of how they mix.
And they're not going to get that. They're just going to see two different colors.
There was also another iteration where the mongrel entity was not mixed, but it was like just conjoined, and it kept the two colors.
I think these look nice. Okay, Billy, did you manage to make an example with a dotted border?
Yeah.
Can you post it or send it?
Yes.
Which are you going to do?
I'm going to post it in the chat if I could find the chat window. There it is. So the left one's the original, then I think orange with the dashes.
I think that's quite reasonable. I mean, maybe the dashes could be...
The dots were getting a little blurry, but maybe that was just
okay.
How I was doing it.
Comments from people? I think that looks pretty reasonable. It's clearly something different, and it seems like there are many. You know, it has this kind of metaphor of many. Thoughts from people?
Yeah, that looks nice.
Okay.
Another idea. There is one thing that is nagging me a little bit about it. I mean, I like it, but to me, a dotted background means things can get in and out. And I wonder if there is a way to make like change the background instead of the border.
No, I don't think so. Unless you want to put, unless you want to have some weird, very precious dotted background, which I just.
No, I was thinking of more like pinstripe.
Pinstriped.
Yeah.
No, it won't be readable. Unless some idea comes to what's that?
We use that in the cloud for loading the back of the page. Those pinstripes, those crosshatched. background.
Yeah, but that's a very different thing.
No, but I was thinking like horizontally pinstriped gives you an idea that it's a list of things. Like a, like a notebook page. It has lines.
What the heck does that have to do with this? I mean,
well, it's a class as opposed to a single thing.
Well, I know that. Well, Billy, do you think there's any hope of something that goes in the background? It seems implausible to me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, unless there was maybe like a second border. No.
I don't think we want a second border. We're already worrying about height for these things.
Yeah.
We already don't like the fact that they have additional height. Now, I don't know whether there's anything we can do to make. I mean, we could try something where it's solid at the top and bottom and it's dotted at the ends. Does that help anybody? I don't think that really helps anything. I think that just makes it look like it's going to be attached to something at the ends.
Yeah, we kind of also had old iconized designs that looked like that also. They were like that frame. It was supposed to be the expander.
Yes, that was not successful. Ben on our live stream is supporting liking the dashes. Actually, it's a good point. It indicates more of a one-off instead of a persistent entity class. It's sort of interesting. All right, I think we should go with these dashes, unless we look at them and decide that they're horrible when they're deployed. But that's what I think we should go for. All right, let's go back to the relational database wrapper.
Okay, just to summarize, the problem is that in general, this stuff is going to form some sort of graph of relations to one another. And the question is whether you want to, so the current behavior of SQL Alchemy is to get the whole connected component. And
right.
I think that will be confusing. So I guess the two options are either you, when you inspect, you message, listen, I'm cutting some edges here, and then you return just the thing.
Okay, so let's remember the context. I mean, so relational database is the thing that you apply to a database connection. Is that right?
Database reference, or I mean, if it's in this case, it's a file, you can just give it as a string.
Okay. Okay, so we're applying this, and then this relational database thing is going to come out with that wrapper that says what tables are in the database. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, sometimes you're in a situation where there are, 200 tables, and this will take forever. So you just want to inspect a few.
I understand that. So how do you specify which ones you want to inspect? That's the first argument.
Yes.
Okay, so wait a minute. So let's just understand what this is. Okay, tables I want. Here, right? So there's going to be potentially a list of tables there. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
Okay. And so the issue now is whether
it might be that there is a reference from table 1 to table 3, and you don't have to.
Exactly. So you specified those tables, but you didn't specify the kind of the all or something. This isn't the right way to do it, but you didn't specify the finish, the transitive closure, the whatever it's called, the
connected component. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So what we need an analogy for is when do you, and we talked about last time, things like include definitions as an analogy to this, right? Include definitions tells you, are you just saving this particular symbol, or are you saving this and its dependencies?
Yeah, we could add an option that says get the whole connected component. But the question is, when you don't set that option, I think it's
I want to understand what we're trying to do here. So we want some option here that says whether to get the connected component, or maybe how much of the connected component to get, because it might be that you might say, there might be almost a max items type thing that says, you might start getting the connected component. If it really is 1,000 tables, you might not want to get all of that.
That's more tricky to implement.
Sure, but it's also more complicated than that. I mean, in general, this functionality should allow you to, say what kind of columns do you want out. If you want to.
So wait a second. So first thing you're saying is which tables, and now you're saying you want to be more fine-grained. Do you, in fact, want to be more fine-grained?
No, I don't think this is the place for this. We already have those options.
All you're doing here is getting the schemas. It doesn't matter. I mean,
maybe not, but I mean, in general, yeah. I mean, and this is probably more for entity store. The renaming is probably done at the level. So yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
The renaming of tables and column names.
Okay, what would you call this option here? I mean, related databases, related. What would you call this?
Follow relation or follow foreign keys.
Related tables to true. I think could also work.
Well, follow redirects. That's kind of interesting. What is that for?
That is for HTTP request.
I see. That's the one-time redirection. That's not okay. So
it's probably at this level should be called follow foreign keys.
Okay, well, let's understand what that might mean. So follow foreign keys. I mean, really what it is include tables, include what you get by following foreign keys, by resolving foreign keys. Is that correct? Or following foreign keys?
Yeah, following foreign keys, really.
Okay. Seth on our live stream is suggesting neighboring tables, arrow, n, or all. It's kind of interesting.
That meaning n steps in the recursion?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
interesting.
I agree. I think that's interesting.
But
I don't think that's quite the right name for it, but I think that concept is interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
but I think that the fact that we can have an option like this, apart from the name, is fairly uncontroversial. What is controversial, on the other hand, is whether you should keep the foreign keys when you inspect. And there are two camps to this discussion. I think they should be kept because they are part of that table, even if they are dangling references.
What would you
on
do
the other
if you
hand,
didn't keep them? What would you put in there?
you can drop. You can just filter them and keep.
I think
the ones
that's crazy. We've got a
reference.
nice symbolic language. Let's put something in there that says missing or some such other thing.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't need to say missing. The problem is going to be that once in version 2 we can write to databases. If you've done something like this and you haven't followed all the foreign keys, you'll get into a state that cannot be written. You cannot make those constraints on the database. And so I think Ricardo was saying, let's issue a message at read time and drop them. And I say, let's issue a message at write time and drop them.
Okay, explain this to me. So hold on, I don't understand this. Okay, so
I can try to explain it maybe in another way. The way I envision this object in the future is that when you want to create a database, this contains all the information about the database that you want to create. Now imagine that you want to move the database forward or backward from one state to the other, right? You want to add the table, add the column, add the foreign key. You can imagine you have just an object and another object, and you say go to from this state to this state. And now the problem I think is that everything that is into the object needs to be fully executed, right? And committed in an atomic transaction. Otherwise, you do a rollback. Now, if you do an inspection on a database and there is a foreign key, and you include this foreign key, even if there is no table defined into this object, the moment you are creating it, then basically it will result in an error. Because
no, I understand. It's a hanging symbolic link, and there isn't.
Yes, and I think it should really not be there. Because
I'm going to argue against that. Okay, I'm going to argue against that. I would have thought what you want there is something that at the client level in our language shows up as some kind of missing thing. And in the case when, if you brought in something which has these hanging foreign keys, you should be able to, if you don't want them there, if you want to drop them, just use delete missing or some such other thing to get rid of them. And then you can go ahead and play and write back the database to your heart's content. But I think it's wrong to not have visibility of the
Stephen, I don't think
keys.
I don't think that they should be replaced by missing. I think they should be there. And then
what do they look like? What does a foreign key look like?
Okay, evaluate that thing That relational database do you have there?
You know what? We're really running out of time. Just tell me what it looks like.
It's an association that contains something like two table from table, two column from column, something like that. So now, if you take that,
so something went wrong here. So I don't.
Yeah, something went wrong there.
Just do input form of
what? Of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
At some point, you should see foreign keys there.
Okay, what do they look like? What
constraint
do they look
name?
Second line, just on the left, foreign keys. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a list that basically says from this guy to this guy.
But so what I'm saying is that you don't need the missing there. You can just check that two table is present in that set. And if it is, and you're trying to write, then you can compare.
Then just don't do it. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Hansel,
and then you can say,
saying gray out the foreign key columns. Don't remove them. I agree. It'd be crazy. There's no reason to remove them.
My only complaint about this is that the moment you are creating an object with those, like, you know, reference, like a constraint that reference to a table that is not there, we should fail. We should not just
fine. Okay, listen, we have an option name we have to name, which is how much to recurse through the foreign key, through foreign keys, right? That reminds me of web crawling. What are the options to web crawl? Does anybody know? That tells it how far to recurse.
Maybe something that contains the word depth.
Okay, it's a little bit obscure. If you say foreign key depth, that's really very hard to parse option name.
How would I check this thing with web crawl? It's not in my build.
I think it's in the documentation. I mean, look at it in.
Stephen, I just want to mention for completeness that I don't believe in this depth approach, and that my take on this would be that if we want to save some time, not inspect everything, then inspection should become lazy.
There is a symbol in system that is called table depth. Sorry.
No, that's a completely different thing. Table depth is something utterly different. It's for table form. Sorry, Leonid, you're saying that it doesn't make sense to do this?
Yes, I'm saying that I don't believe in this. I think that right now, the question was asked, it makes sense. But when we add the writing to the database, then we should treat entire database as a thing that exists. And so if we inspect part of it, I would do it in the lazy way, so that if we need it for writing, for whatever we inspect, whatever subset of the tables that we really need, but we don't cut it on some arbitrary condition that you go only that far. It just doesn't make sense for me.
Okay. Well, okay. We need a name for this particular option.
So in web crawl map, it has max depth and max items.
Yeah, max depth is totally obscure. Look, follow foreign keys is probably, given that we've actually calling these things foreign keys right there in the structure, that probably is, and I guess since everybody in the database world calls them foreign keys, maybe that's what we do. And if it turns out we can later on have an actual number, then so be it. But for the time being, it's just
we can support a number there. It's not a problem.
No, but I think it's fairly obscure. I think you either want yes or no. You don't want you don't want partial, like do it twice and then stop. I don't think people will want that.
Is it follow foreign keys? Hold on. Is it follow foreign keys or pull in the foreign keys? I mean, it's not really follow. It's whether those foreign key pieces are include followed foreign keys. It's kind of the
no. You're including the tables. You're including tables that are pointed to by foreign keys.
So, I mean, it would be something like include foreign key tables. Although it isn't really tables at our level, it would be more like foreign key types.
No. At this level, there's still
include
tables.
related tables or something like that. Because
Yeah, include related tables is
yeah, I think it's the best so far. And they should still be called tables because they were not we haven't made them into types yet.
maybe just include related.
No way. Include related is obscure.
No, I like include related tables.
Oh yeah, Carl on our live stream is commenting that we shouldn't use foreign keys in the name because in the future we might have graph databases and entity stores.
Yeah, but graph databases will have a different symbol, not relational database. So this is
that's
just.
true, but it would be nice to reuse the option. Look, I think include related tables is a reasonable thing to say.
Okay. I agree.
Okay, and I have to go, unfortunately. So
one last question. Okay, we decided to keep the foreign key, but I still think that maybe it's still better to send a message in case you are saying, this guy to false, and then there is a relation you are not following. We should say a message. Look, you are not following this relation.
I think that's perfectly reasonable.
You would like to silence?
Perfectly reasonable. Foreign keys are present. Relation is not being followed. That sounds highly reasonable to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not very happy with this message thing because you ask something very precisely. You set an option.
Okay, if you explicitly set the option, okay, so maybe the compromise is if the option is set to false, then you don't issue a message, right?
But if it's set to automatic, yes.
Right. Well, what the heck does automatic do?
It means false, but issue messages. I don't know.
That seems a little weird.
But that's the only way. I mean, the option cannot be unset, really. You either set it to I mean, if it's
I understand.
If the default is false, then putting false explicitly should have the same effect.
I don't know whether we should have I don't think it's. Look, I just don't know in database practice whether
Actually, I think that practically when people are doing this inspection and then they are searching for, what part of the database they need to use, it's a useful thing. You can always ignore it.
On our live stream, Seth is suggesting include foreign key tables.
But it's nice to know that if you're selecting table A and then it says, table C, maybe you should consider including tables.
I think we should have the message at the beginning. We can always, decide we don't need the message.
I think that the right place for the message is writing, not reading. Really, it doesn't.
Okay.
Why?
Let's put the message in for now, okay? And
Sorry, connection problems.
What's that? Let's put the message in for now, and we can take it out if we think it's stupid. If we get too annoyed by seeing it, we'll take it out. I have to run.
Okay.
Hopefully, this is the end of this series of meetings.
We still need to review documentation. There are some reference pages.
Next time you got to be much better organized than this meeting. Okay.
Okay.
I hope we don't have to spend much more time on this. Okay, I got to run right now. Thanks to all. See ya. Bye.